I like your new legs. They make you look tall.
Wow, Admiral Akbar!
My, this here Anakin guy.
Alright, go.
Somehow.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
It wasn't always this complicated. Spoiler warning for all Star Wars films. You'd be forgiven for forgetting how simple that first movie is. Star Wars. Star Wars was basic and perfect. I wrote a whole segment on this, but the first 15 minutes of OSP's Rogue One video said it better than I ever could, so if you want a detailed breakdown, just go there, hashtag not sponsored. It also made a boatload of money. That freed George Lucas to expand his vision, and that is how we got sequels, then spin-offs.
Solo. Say that again?
And simplicity submerged.
Grab a chip.
Since the buyout, Disney has gone back to the beginning 3 times. The Force Awakens does Star Wars again and does it well. Rogue One slots in back to back. And then there's this. 40 Tales for the 40th anniversary. Does this book overcomplicate things by reliving A New Hope from so many different perspectives? Not really. These are short stories about background characters who return to the straightforward storytelling at the start of Star Wars. But each of the authors commissioned had the chance to do a lot or a little with that single opportunity. Which characters have the best stories to tell? To find out, I read every story and ranked them from 40th to 1st. I'll introduce each with where it fits in the timeline, my favourite quote for explaining why it earns its place. And if you think my rankings are dead wrong, I'm sure that's true, from a certain point of view. F
It's for the way you
40. Far too
Our
remote.
scout ships have reached Dantooine. They found the remains of a rebel base, but they estimate that it has been deserted for some time.
Dantooine is too remote to make an effective demonstration.
Far Too Remote is a cute one-line, one-panel Dantooine cartoon. I didn't want to be mean to any written stories by putting them dead last, so sorry Jeffrey, but you go here. 39. We don't serve that kind here.
What?
Your droids.
I like this characterization of Obi-Wan. I like that nothing works in this place. That's it. You can see why Disney cut Chuck Wendig from the payrolls the year after he delivered this chapter. Where says he doesn't like complaints, yet this whole story is nothing but complaints, and stupid complaints. Why is a free Wookiee such a confusing concept to a guy who works for one? Why does a piece about droid hate say nothing new about droids? Why does a guy created as the world's least subtle segregationist analog now have a tragic backstory?
No!
Yes!
No!
Why not? Why won't you think?
Because
Droids.
kill my grandma, okay? Now leave me alone. What?
An ending as pathetically non-committal as maybe he could change his destiny, but would he? Gets you dumped on the great heap.
This
38.
is a
bucket.
Dear God. There's more. No. It contains a bucket.
What does the bucket want to be? A story about a stormtrooper who loves doing imperialism, which he knows is really evil, and also he thinks Princess Leia is pretty rad. This is way too heavy-handed in both directions. We end on this baffling note where he doffs the bucket to reveal his blue eyes and sandy hair. I can't figure out if it's meant to be some incomprehensible Aryan allegory,
I don't need no cue card.
or if it's foreshadowing Luke doing the same thing, which sucks. That just cheapens Leia meeting Luke. I don't want that. Bad. Bad. 37. Added muscle. That quote is the only saving grace for added muscle. Attempting to rescue the sorry scene was a thankless task. Why, oh why would you grant Boba Fett a wisecracking narration? It's not funny, it kills his gravitas, and the ending line is truly atrocious.
And you murdered my father! I'll never forgive you.
Well, You're going to have to.
As long as he's in a generous mood, I'll hit him up for a mug of that fine brew. After today, I could use one. What do you mean? You did nothing! You were just getting paid to stand around and pick your nose! This scene wasn't even in the original movie. Jabba's menace was built up way more by his absence for 2 whole films. Han gets away with stepping on his tail. He should become a crispy fried He
is for
the only I see. 36. You owe me a ride.
They'll have to wait outside. We don't want them in.
I'm not bothered by this piece, it's just a tell don't show description fest. If you want to invest my hopes and dreams in your twin protagonists, the way to my heart is not just referencing things I do know. The Organas, Naboo, Canto Bight, Lando, Jabba's Rancor, Hondo, and Chewie and Han. The last of whom the twins say they're scared of? What? Who's scared of Han? I feel like you gotta roll a 1 or a 20 on your perception check for that kind of reaction to this. I like that the twins head off to a brighter future, I just have no interest in following them there. 35. Wills. A light-hearted epilogue was a good choice, and I enjoy a couple of gags. Unfortunately, a lot of this humour comes from undercutting itself in cheap ways. Please do not make me read the words "What the Hutt" or "Oh my Jabba," or remind me that the holiday special exists. 34. Rerin. Internal monologuing. A lot of it. I hear loud and clear that she's got contempt to go around, but her motivations and the potential of her Kyber crystal are opaque. A mention of Bestine promises a more exciting story about life as the rare off-world Tusken Raider. Promise that is never fulfilled. At least she's not as passive as our next character. 33. The Luckless Rodian. Greedo's audition as Han's biggest hater is fun. Unfortunately, his commentary repeats the same trick again and again. He sees a hero, he assumes the hero is a loser, and we experience dramatic irony because we know they're not a loser. The concept isn't clever. A lot of the sentences are stilted. The actual moment of action will leave you feeling well. 32. Born in the Storm.
How long have you had these droids?
About 3 or 4 seasons.
They're up for sale if you want them.
While this writing style occasionally pops off, I like that the fuzzbugger squabbles out his words. This Tommy needs drinky humour. His casual demeanour juxtaposes okay with the mission report format and works really well for depicting the mind trick. But the conclusion that all of this is building to is when he deserts, and it feels almost as though the author didn't know where this was going and had to suddenly wrap it up. 31. The Red One.
Come on. Come on, Red, let's go. Owen!
Yeah?
This R2 unit has a bad motivator, look!
The Red One takes a good hard look at the disparity between droids, where R5's struggle to see makes even an oil bath satisfying, and Owen's choice of R5 regardless a great moment of character, but the dismal execution of both characterizations prohibits this from coming in higher. R5's motives make no sense, nor do I buy R2 as a reluctant saboteur, and their voices feel just like organics. Why is R2 hitting another droid with "You're my only hope"? That being said, I do like R2's farewell, R5's ending, and that R5 accepts R2's credibility at his own pace.
D is very, very...
Detention block AA-23.
Boring conversation anyway.
30. Master and Apprentice.
Qui-Gon.
He's always here, Obi-Wan. We're not ready to see.
Okay, listen. Claudia Gray is one of the best authors that Disney has on the beat today. Just consider how well her writing here depicts physical reality coming into focus. However, this is a piece that successfully convinces you that Qui-Gon Jinn does not care about human life. At which point, I have to throw my hands up and ask, what is this story for? Qui-Gon cares about some distant things, the dead Jawas, the dead Queen, the years Ben spent on this dead zone of a planet, but the central question of the piece is Ben's impending death, and Qui-Gon is like,
I look like I give a f***.
wait, that's the wrong Jedi. 29.
Go for Papa
Palpatine.
Darth Vader.
I gotta take this. Hold on. What do you mean they blew up the Death Star?
Duesh's stick rewrites Star Wars as Shakespeare. Palpatine is a great choice for the language of the stage. However, consider that the only pieces of information conveyed in the story are 1. Shock at Obi-Wan's survival, and 2. The commitment to kill the Jedi, the latter of which will not exactly come as breaking news to anybody who the Phantom Menace didn't put to sleep. This piece is too long for too little to talk about. 28. By Whatever Sun.
Morning, Hamilton. Nice stand.
This is chronologically the ending to A New Hope, and serves its place as a release of emotion. I like the through line for the future, that the survivors of the Empire's genocides find a home and purpose with the rebellion. However, nobody gets characterized in this, and there's no new perspective to offer on the scene itself. Please, I just want one story to offer an interesting external look at Leia. 27. End of Watch.
We're fine. We're all fine here now, thank you. How are you?
We're sending a squad up.
End of Watch shows too much of its hand to achieve its intended horror. I respect fleshing out this creative choice of perspective, and the lavender gag, pun intended, is great. However, when your main character is established as a fiend for boredom, they're not physically present where all the interesting bits are happening, and they can't do anything, then your story has nowhere compelling to go. 26. Ramus. The first story chronologically, Ramus enriches Rogue One by magnifying Scarif's significance. However, the explanation that the Tantive 4's weapons and shields are in a bad way does nothing to enhance A New Hope. The visual alone got across the point that this ship is totally Also, there's so much praise for Leia here that always so damn enigmatic is tonally way off the mark, just as for our princess. 25. Rights. The hook is exciting, but with the crate dragon going down far too easily, it contributes little to this generic tale of old versus young. There are good, subtle lore nods like the cursed campsite, and the scene of primal fear is great. I just wish the young'un was as well developed as the oldie. 24. Bump.
About 3 or 4 seasons?
They're up for sale if you want them.
Let me see your identification.
The brief sentences are effective. I like a collaborator protagonist. I love that he fails a perception check on the droids, that he flubs again, and that being bad at being evil saves his life. 23. There is another.
Go. Failed. Much anger in him. Like his father, there is another.
The last of the Jedi. I said you were, but I wasn't totally straight about your fate. In fact, some say I lied. Because Leia is one too. It's true. From a certain point of view.
The solid description of Yoda in exile as a broken man builds to a grand twist. Yoda's conviction that Leia, not Luke, is their only hope. This is a great idea for a conflict with Obi-Wan. Unfortunately, the piece is totally lacking for oomph, with a pale, washed out ending.
See, is even more than.
Close the blast door. Open the blast door.
22. Not for Nothing. The autobiographical format suits a series of jokes about Jabba World, like sending a stormtrooper to the palace, Greedo freeing prisoners to claim their bounties a second time, and an editor's note that Jabba the Hutt cannot be thanked anymore. I also like how baffled our hero is as to how the droids even got this far through Mos Eisley. I mean, yeah, that's a fair point from their point of view. This is just too thin on character and story to climb high. 21. Fully operational.
They're more dangerous than you realize.
it is possible, however unlikely, the rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
This feels like a spiritual predecessor to Andor's ISB scenes. We get to appreciate how the famous argument began before the Cameron entered the room, in a wonderfully sinister atmosphere punctuated by Krennic's empty chair.
20. Liner.
That quote is the entire purpose of this piece. Past this, it's just dagger twisting. The biggest twist in the entire book hits hard on your first read, but on reinspection it's clear that the story is too long and tangential without ever actually investing you in Lina herself. There's interesting material here around bringing a toddler to a military base and refusing to conceal traumatic events from that child, but without exploring these ideas any further, the story hinges too much on one twist to climb higher.
19. The Baptist.
It's worse. There's something alive in here. Something just moved past my leg.
I cannot believe that the Dianoga story was good. The boldest pick of perspective, and of all the characters in the book who are supposed to know their mission based on vibes alone, this is the best. The piece is clunky about how she forgets home. I wish that Luke's baptism enjoyed some meta-commentary about its place in his heroic arc. Yet I find this doomed captive truly compelling.
18. Sparks.
How many guns do you think go fire?
The guns, they've stopped.
I'm glad we got to learn what it was like to fly one of the Y-Wings on this mission. This is just really solid writing on the fatal misconception that you're the hero of this story.
17. The Sith of Data Work.
There's no life forms. Unless a short circuit.
Hold your fire? What are we, paying by the laser now?
You don't do the budget, Terry. I do.
From the get-go, the satirical tone of this gaggle of bureaucratic gags is established with a dig at Stormtrooper AIM. They aren't just funny, they build into coherent motivation, a little web of influence. And when she wins a round of target practice, that genuinely feels really satisfying. B
is all that I can give.
16. Beru White Sun Lars.
And if these new droids do work out, I want to transmit my application to the Academy this year.
Of the three pieces in this book, From Beyond the Grave, how is this the best one? Beru presents a believable conflict between her personal career ambitions and her desire to embark on an uphill climb to raise a child. That makes for a short and sweet story, which really endears you to this minor character. I also think it's super funny that she lays into Anakin as a deadbeat, and yet it only adds to his tragedy. 15. Eclipse. This piece kicks off by hitting you with the trick where somebody segues from their point into stating nonsense to see if you're still paying attention, and like and subscribe to this video. That speaks to Breia's wariness, which really makes us feel how badly she misses her loved ones. Her imagery of Alderaan is beautiful. We get to know the planet, the person, and her view of Bail too. In a heart-wrenching twist of irony, Breia's fixation on how much danger Leia is in off-world makes her oblivious to the danger here and now. Even though, in a fascinating quirk of character, Bail insists the rebellion cannot afford to search for their daughter, the couple dies in a hopeful denial. 14. The Trigger.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
Aphra is a character with a mess of inconsistent views, but she feels believable and real, with a strong sense of self, described richly through the items she chooses to carry rather than any innate attributes, and a light wit. This is one of the deepest explorations of a theme in this book, tackling how and when we choose to carry out violence, and it's a fitting meditation on what the Death Star's firing means to the galaxy. 13. Time of Death.
Can't believe he's gone.
At one time, this was my favourite story in the entire book. It's a bold call to undercut Ben's great moment of serenity by depicting his brain scrambling across time and space as that lightsaber goes through him. Hopping back to past events as Obi-Wan pieces the chaos together allows us to finally fully understand why Kenobi chooses to sacrifice himself after all. 12. Desert Sun. As with Sparks, depictions of the trench run hinge on how well you can write the action, leaving little room to explore. What recommends this piece so highly is its strong sense of character voice. Biggs is slow, raw, and earnest, a personality you can feel as you follow him to his chilling end.
11. Verge of Greatness.
Governor Tarkin.
Evacuate? In our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances.
Tarkin's shameless opportunism is as delightful as his overstating sense of importance. He thinks he could defy Coruscant, and there's an irony that he resents Alderaan for doing the exact same thing just for actually good reasons. We get a look at a mighty whacked Scarif, and while it's a shame that this piece breezes over his chat with Leia, this is a great characterization of A New Hope's primary villain. The conclusion goes to Krennic, who delivers the perspective Tarkin lacks as to how
This is not going to go the way you think.
10. Of My 6 and Men.
Get me a scanning crew in here on the double. I want every part of this ship checked.
my goodness, what an inspired format. And what an inspired plot. The story is so OTT and it makes me laugh so hard. I love this inversion of
What's this?
for comedic purposes. I love Tarkin's droid know-how. I love how the rebel murders give Tarkin personal stakes in this struggle. I love that this hilariously out-of-place soap opera to the nth degree made it into this tone.
9. Change of Heart.
I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. Tatooine.
There, you see, Lord Vader? You're far too trusting.
This piece convincingly sets up how committed its main character is to imperialism. That makes Leia's relatability confronting and intriguing, right down to their little game of keeping in stride. The piece convinces you that Tarkin will outwit her, and then the realization dawns that he and Vader are missing something here. It's a vivid description for one of the great Leia scenes with meaningful stakes at play. It's Imperial's choice to stay silent in protest to Alderaan's destruction buys time to save Leia from execution. She can direct our heroes to the rebel base with the plans, destroying the Death Star with everyone on board.
A
is more than just a game for two.
8. The Angle.
Are you slimy, double-crossing, no-good swindler? What?
You ask me, Alderaan had it coming is a wild opening line. A provocative reminder that Lando, like Han, is not a hero when we first meet him. I love that he couldn't care less about the galaxy-shattering events playing out. He's just shocked to see his beloved Falcon in the shot. This whole piece is rich with foreshadowing for the hero that Lando will grow into. His conclusion hits the spot, a refusal of the call that leaves Lando locked into the bad ending of his life, where he keeps winning and losing and scraping by, unable to see the bigger picture until Han and company show up on his doorstep and force him to choose.
7. Incident Report.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. You're clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
Night battle pass.
Tone, established. Comedy, peak. Verdict, banger. Even putting the non-stop jokes aside, there genuinely is a lot of information being communicated here. For instance, we get the background on his feud with Taggart, and after 6 pages of moaning and griping, there could be no better way to conclude than, I have no further comment on the matter.
6. Contingency Plan.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Ooh, I love this one. Love the bitter old puppet masters of this charnel house of a galaxy. Love how the drizzly base feels to stride across. Love her pathetic self-pity. With the universe resting on her shoulders, Mon Mothma is both ruthless and shattered. This is her best characterization that I've ever read, and this demonstrates A New Hope, the movie in which she doesn't appear on screen, as the crucible that forges her into the future.
5. Duty Roster.
But it's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than team eaters.
Then man your ships.
Just one critique, I do wish that the call to put Skywalker on the mission received a proper justification here, because it still seems like such an odd choice. All we really needed were a few throwaway lines about how surviving the Leia rescue shows he has a knack for fighting on the fly. That aside, you can really feel that this is a homage to the old X-Wing novels, complete with no-name pilots beefing with Wedge. Wedge's anger feels so raw and earned. I appreciate all the details on the ships. I love that Scarif has consequences for the way this battle unfolds, and there's the steady realization dawning that Wedge is an ace of no compare, as our protagonist Cole only now realizes that if they had picked him to go up there, he would have made the mistake that Wedge does not.
4. The Secrets of Long Snoot.
This piece manages the rare achievement of writing a character who feels genuinely alien without being so distant and unnatural that we can no longer relate to them. I adore that his edgy monologue is brought down by reality from the get-go. There's mutual contempt and ignorance between him and the denizens of Mos Eisley, a culture of loathing and unearned superiority over one another. His moral parodies around selling out others just to obtain information on the fate of his family are fascinating. And finally, we have to talk about the use of Labria the Deveronian. This is the deepest cut in the book and one of the deepest I've spotted in the new canon, along with the Mind Harp of Sharu shoutout in Solo, a Star Wars story that I still haven't seen a single other person mention #FakeFans. All the way back in Tales of the Bounty Hunters 1996, yes, this is the one with the infamous IG-88A as the second Death Star plot. Let's not talk about that one right now. The main antagonist of The Last One Standing, The Tale of Boba Fett, is Labria the Deveronian, who turns out to actually be Cardu Malok, the Butcher of Montelian Sarat, one of the most wanted war criminals in the galaxy. That reference is used so well and tastefully here compared to so many other references to better known Star Wars lore in the book. It explains why Labria is offended at Long Snoot's rubbish taste in music, because we know from Last One Standing that Cardu Malok cares even more about a fine symphony than his own life. And it creates this great cosmic irony for Snoot desperately grubbing around for credits. He accepts the deal with the devil to kill some rebels so that he can afford to go lead his own planet in revolt. That could have been totally averted by the 20 million credits from bringing in Labria, had he only paid more attention and not been so, well, snooty.
3. Grounded.
The format described in that quote carries this piece through. Our protagonist is so well established. While trying to remain clinical and numbers focused, she pays personal attention to every pilot. The effect when she starts listing casualties in italics, and you turn the page to see half the next page is in italics, it hits you like, well, a TIE fighter. I love her freak out over Luke's targeting computer. What a great way to tie this perspective back into the movie. And what an immaculate tearjerker of an ending. For one of the best sequences in any Star Wars film, this is a thoroughly fitting companion piece. But there are two yet simpler, with stakes a million times as small, but closer to my heart.
Love can make it. Take my heart and
then you break it. 2. Stories in the Sand.
So they put it on display. Some people play a fine guitar.
An outsider. An underdog thanks to his height and his secrets. In this land where they believe there's more sand than sky, he's stuck licking batteries, burning himself in hot metal, and musing on mysterious Faro fortresses. And then he gains his cool decryption device. His thirst for stories is quenched, and you get that beautiful sequence that moistened my eyes just writing the script. This custom droid component had given Jot a first-hand account of a ship's final, doomed flight through the stars. When Storyteller first flashed this image into existence, Jot's eyes flooded with stinging tears. Seeing the story, seeing stars and flight, and the only planet he'd ever lived on, from kilometers above, his eyes would not dry for some time. But this isn't a tragedy where he's condemned to a pitiful existence. Little Jot has a sense of history and a place in the big wide galaxy. A galaxy that he is confident he can make sense of just like anything else. He gets to learn about all these places he hopes to go to someday, even as he has to erase those memories. And when he gets to R2's history, and even though you know A New Hope has already happened and nothing you or he does can change it, you still get this wave of relief at knowing that he wouldn't even dare to touch that droid's memory because of what sets Jot apart and makes him different, and he sends R2 on his way. He's passed his test in the wider cosmos. Now it's Jot's turn to make somebody of himself. Now Jot's is the story to watch. One of my favourite Star Wars characters of all time, and he gets 15 pages. But as simple and clean and pure as that was, in the end, I had to hand the #1 spot to the most absurd, ridiculous, overcomplicated, extraneous pile-up in this whole book. So it's time to present the Clue-Horn Cantina Caper. I've mentioned several times through this video the impact that a good first impression can have. There's also Grounded's technique on turning the page to encounter a wall of death. Well, let me tell you, you know what you're in for the moment you turn the page and see a mountain of italics as the Chadra fan chirps on and on through a Shaggy Dog story that descends a step further into farce several times over. This thing is an overload of non-stop lively wit. What's more, there's also wonderful characterization. Han's little moment of humanity is perfect for him. It demonstrates an understanding of what makes the character interesting without jumping ahead on his road to heroism. I love Dejas's ethical pondering, and it really accents where Han is going nicely. There's better Greedo characterization here than in any other story of this compendium, and all of these interlocking motives and characters build and build into a Rube Goldberg machine of a story. In the end, when the cards fall their way and they get lucky and everything works out for another day, I genuinely tore up. It made me laugh, it made me smile, it made me appreciate how Star Wars can bring all these people together. Of these 40 stories, the Clue-Horn Cantina Caper is the best from my certain point of view. No.
That was made for me and you.
Hope.
That was made for me and you.
That's it! We did it!
We did it!